If you're making products in your woodworking business and selling those online, you're probably shipping them. In episode 44, we talked about using software to solve a lot of your shipping problems and how to get set up with the big three shippers. And in last episode, we talked about getting materials and boxes and dunnage or void fill to efficiently and quickly and safely package your products for shipping with USPS, UPS, and FedEx. Today, episode number 46, we're going to talk about shipping furniture. Hi, my name's Roger Kugler. This is Working at Woodworking Podcast, where I am desperately trying to encourage people to get into the service industry of woodworking, whether that is furniture repair, furniture construction, furniture refinishing, building cabinets, building bookcases, whatever your local community needs, using your skills to step up either full-time or part-time and sharing those skills with your community. There is a great need. I turn work down every week, sometimes every day, simply because the old-timers are gone, either retired or passed away, and we need some young blood coming in to this profession. And you don't necessarily have to be young blood. If you've been a doctor, lawyer, and Indian chief for 40 years and you've been woodworking for 30 years, hey, hang out a shingle. You can take on some projects. Share that wealth of knowledge that you have with your community. Now, it really depends on the product that you are specializing in. What are you selling? And if you're kind of starting out here, this is a real good episode to give you some information on how you can plan what products you might want to choose to sell. If you're doing plant stands or children's furniture, you can often ship those with the big three. If you're building 9-drawer dressers or maybe king-size beds, that's not going to work. You're going to need some other solutions. And I've mentioned this before, in your planning stage, always keep shipping in the back of your mind whenever you're designing something, because just a couple inches here or there can mean big money whenever it comes time to ship. So how big of a package can I ship with the big three? Can I ship a bookcase? Well, let's take a good hard look at that. Now, what we're talking about here is ground shipping with the USPS, UPS, and FedEx. And USPS, if you go onto their website, you look at their guidelines, they tell you that they have a maximum combined inch size restriction of 108 inches. What does that mean? That means if you take your package, measure the perimeter, add the length, that number cannot be larger than 108 inches. They also have a weight restriction of 70 pounds. So let's break this down. Can we ship a bookcase with USPS? Hypothetical. Let's say that I'm going to design a bookcase that is 36 inches wide and 24 inches high. And I put one, maybe two shelves in there. It's going to be 10 inches deep. So what I would do if I was really digging into this is I'd pull out a spreadsheet and do a little formula there of, 2H height plus 2W, the width, plus the length, L, is equal to the number that I'm looking for, or X. So if I plug those numbers in, 10, 24, and 36, I get 104 inches. My limit's 108, but I also have to add padding into this. And for something like this, 1-inch foam would be perfectly fine. But now my dimensions are over the 108 with the 1-inch padding and the cardboard. So I'm going to cut that back, 34 by 8 by 22. That should work. What about the weight? I'm limited to 70 pounds. I want to build this out of white oak, Quercus alba. If we look up in our wood database book that I've encouraged everyone to buy, or go to the website wooddatabase.com, and we find that white oak has a density of 47 pounds per cubic foot. Cubic foot, that's 12 by 12 by 12. That's 12 board feet divided by carry the 2, bring over the 1. That comes out to 3.9 pounds per board foot. My bookcase is going to use about 10 board feet of white oak. Times 3.9 comes out to about 39 pounds. I want to put a real sturdy plywood back in this case. I'm going to use 1/2-inch plywood. And a 4x8 sheet of that weighs about 40 pounds. 40 divided by 32, carry the 1, about 1.25 pounds per square foot. And we're about 2x3 for this little bookcase, 6 feet times 1.25, 7.5. We've got about 47 pounds in this little bookcase. Add to box, add to foam, 47, 50. I'm going to call it 55 pounds. We are well below that 70-pound limit. So yes, you can make this little bookcase and ship it with USPS. But what if we move to UPS? Now we get 165 inches, and our weight limit moves way up to 150 pounds. And UPS gives us a maximum length of 108 inches. So if you were interested in building a king-size bed, if you did it right, you could probably ship the bed rails and the headboard and a footboard maybe together in 2 or 3 separate packages, and that could actually work because you can stay within that length range. Now, with each one of these companies, I strongly encourage you to go onto their websites and look up their packaging guidelines because they're all a little bit different. UPS wants you to use 2 to 3 inches of foam around your object. It's not like shipping a jewelry box. The jewelry box is pretty light, and we can use, crumpled up newspaper, to protect that. But when you're putting, a bookcase or something that's going to be much heavier, that's going to require more dense packing material. In fact, they strictly warn against using packing peanuts because of their tendency to kind of shift around, and they're pretty soft. They're just not going to stand up to the weight of your item. They recommend a rigid foam. FedEx, read their guidelines. In fact, FedEx has the same limits, that 165 inches and 150 pounds. I like the FedEx website a little better. Their guidelines, I think, are a little more thorough and a little more clear. But do read those and get a really good understanding before you get too far into it. So what's the largest piece of furniture I could ship with UPS or FedEx? Let's think about a console table, a credenza. One of those little tables that you set behind a couch, which is a horizontal surface which absolutely demands to be totally filled with every nuance of book and magazine in your house. Someplace in there is the TV remote. Yeah, that one. Let's say we want to build this thing about, 20 inches deep, fairly wide, about 60 inches long, 5 feet, and about 30 inches tall. Well, that comes out to about 160 inches. So we're inside that 165 maximum limit, but we have to pad this thing out with 2 inches of foam all the way around. So that's going to cut we're not going to be able to do it. We're going to be over. Why the 2-inch foam? Well, it comes down to insurance, because with each one of these companies, they have a certain dollar amount that they automatically give you for shipping. With USPS, I think it's $100. And that's only good if you follow all of their packing guidelines. So if you build this credenza, you load it full of packing peanuts and you ship it across the country, and it gets damaged, and you have to take pictures and send it in to them. They see the packing peanuts and says, you haven't followed our guidelines, therefore we're denying your claim. So if you want to use their insurance, you've got to follow their rules. So what do we do now? Well, you could change your dimensions, or you could get into RTA furniture. RTA, ready to assemble. oftentimes that's associated with IKEA. And it kind of has a bad connotation. It kind of leaves sawdust in your mouth. But honestly, virtually any dining room table is going to be RTA. That doesn't mean that all dining room tables suck. It just simply means that you have to be able to take them apart to get them through a door. So in your design process, you could look at how this could come apart and be packaged in a smaller unit and then shipped more economically. We'll get into that a little bit deeper here in a few minutes. But if you're building something like a bookcase or maybe a cupboard or corner cabinet, you can't take that apart. I mean, it is one big solid unit. So how are we going to ship that? This is called the world of freight. The big rigs, the 18-wheelers. You'll almost immediately see the term LTL, less than truckload. If you're a really big company and you're producing a product and you need to ship 1 billion units to Los Angeles, you hire a semi-truck, you load the thing, totally stuff it full, and you ship it across country. Well, we're shipping less than truckload. We just need a little tiny piece of that big rig. Now, if you go onto a website, pick any of your big, transport companies, Old Dominion, Pilot, Warner, any of those guys, you'll see one of the very first questions they ask is, what are you shipping? What is the freight classification? And they've really worked this out in the fact that they not only are they concerned about the weight, but more so they're concerned with the density of your product. So if you're shipping, let's say, truck engines, that's going to be handled different than if you're shipping baby beds. They might occupy the same volume, but they're going to have a much different density. And they consider handling. Am I going to have to use a forklift or a pallet jack to move this thing? Or can 2 strong people pick it up and carry it off the truck? And how about stowability? Can I stack a truck engine on top of your credenza? And also the liability. Is the value of this product $1,500 or $15,000? So all of that goes into the freight classification. Typically, you'll see a freight classification for most furniture of around $175. But before we get too deep into shipping freight, let's figure out what is behind us. What are we going to have to do simply to ship freight? Typically, you're going to have to package your furniture the same as you would your jewelry box, but it gets a little more intense. You can use cardboard, but the cardboard needs to be strong enough to withstand the rigors of freight shipping. You need to use 2 or 3 inch foam all around that package. And one company rep told me that most carriers are really starting to demand palatability. Yeah, not the how something tastes, but actually using a pallet or make it forklift friendly that they can move your package. They don't want a box that they have to get 2 people over there to lift up and move. They want to be able to mechanically move your product. And depending on your furniture, you might want to just go ahead and crate it. The rep that I talked to said that crate and pallets are becoming more and more encouraged in the shipping industry, basically to cut down on damage. It's less likely that you're going to put a forklift through a properly crated box than it is a cardboard box. So how does this work? You build your furniture, you need to ship it across the country, you call one of the big freight companies, they come and pick up your crate that you meticulously built, and also considering the money that is going to cost for the material, plywood is not cheap, and don't even think about using particle board or OSB. They don't consider that adequate crating material. So you're going to have to use a decent quality construction grade plywood when you're building this thing. The truck shows up at the end of the driveway and you get your forklift and you take it out and you load it. wait a minute, you don't have a forklift. Well, he can just pull into the loading dock. Oh, you don't have a loading dock either. You will need to request a lift gate. And so now they send a truck that has a lift gate that you can roll your thing out and put it on a lift gate, bring it in, just like you're getting a tool from Grizzly. And the semi pulls away and it goes from this terminal to that terminal and it gets transferred to this truck and to this trailer and it goes across the country and it gets sent out for delivery where the truck pulls up to the driveway and they have a lift gate because they know your customer in residential area doesn't have a loading dock and they drop it off at the end of the driveway and drives off. Yeah, that might not be the best customer service. You might be getting a phone call from the customer. You know, these folks have worked all their life. They may be retired. They're not going to drag this great big crate that has their prized possession, corner cabinet in it that they've spent, several $1,000s for. No, that's not going to happen. So this might not be the best solution to your problem. So anytime that you're faced with trying to figure out how something works, instead of inventing the wheel, you might want to find out what type of wheels other people are using. So I jumped on Etsy and looked at some furniture makers. There's some really incredible stuff on there. And I send a convo to several of them. Convo is kind of that internal email system that Etsy uses. And I very promptly got replies back, not from the craftsman herself, but from their, secretary, wife, daughter, employee, saying, "I'm sorry, such and such is too busy to talk to you." Yeah, it figures. So then I picked up the phone, and with an internet search, I landed at Vermont Wood Studio. This is a pretty good-sized company. They've been around for a while. They're located in Vernon, Vermont. I've included a link in the show notes if you want to check them out. Very cool website, really well done. They have a video. They have several videos on there. One video shows them how they use linseed oil for their finishes. And they were building, looked like a little nightstand. And instead of breaking out the linseed oil and the brush or maybe a rag and applying it to the nightstand, making sure getting into all the corners and everything, it shows them taking the nightstand and they bring it over this tank and they dunk it into the tank, kind of swish it around, pull the thing out and set it on this little table where it drains and the oil, excess oil, drips back into the tank. Finishing by baptism. Wonderful idea. I wonder if I could use that with canoes. So anyway, I called him up, very helpful. The guy I talked to allowed me to pick his brain. He said that for their local delivery, and they're building furniture, basically. Bedroom furniture, dressers, kitchen tables, occasional tables, bookcases, things like that. He said for their local deliveries within around 50 miles or so, they have a truck. And they just, kind of like a furniture company downtown, they will make deliveries within a certain mile radius. And if it's outside of their delivery radius, they use a regional delivery service. And for their national customers, they use Pilot, white glove service. Huh? Okay, this is something totally new to me. White glove service from a freight company. Remember earlier how I was talking about, your freight company dropped this great big crate off at the end of the driveway? That's not necessarily always the case. Talking to the Pilot rep, I found out that the trucking industry has really kind of changed over the last 20 years or so. It's not kind of the rough and tumble, here's your load, where's your forklift type of thing that it used to be, but they have really kind of tuned into the customer service thing. And Pilot, that's the only one I really talked to, have developed what they call their white glove service. So they will pick up your crate, load it onto their vehicles, ship it across the country, transfer it to a smaller, typically a Sprinter van, and deliver it to your customer. And depending on the service that the customer has paid for, take it inside their home, uncrate it, take it to the room that it's supposed to be set up in, and if it's something that requires light assembly, like, table legs, they will put that on. This is their premier service. So no longer is your customer going to be standing at the end of the driveway trying to figure out how they're going to get this 200-pound crate into their house. They also have a service called Inside First Door, where they would actually take it in through your front door and just set it there and leave. And they have a mailbox delivery where they take it to, wherever your mailbox is, which is probably the end of the driveway, and leave it there. Each level of service is going to cost a little bit more money. Not being an expert in shipping furniture, the one thing I have learned is that when people are spending really good money for a really good piece of furniture, they're not going to really quibble over the price of delivery. They want the service, and they're not that worried about the cost of the service. So how much does this cost? Well, you need to talk to the delivery service that you're using. I tried my best to get hard numbers, and it's very difficult to do. You literally have to call them and say how much to deliver a crate that is these dimensions, weighs this much money to this address during this time period. You have to be very, very specific for them to give you an accurate number. I would say roughly it's not going to be cheap. Are we talking more than $300? Yeah. $500? Probably. For cross country? $1,000? Yeah, if you want that premier white glove service, yeah, it's going to be a chunk of change. But again, if you're moving an item 2,000 miles, do you want to hop in your truck and do that? Or would you rather hire someone to do that for you? Now, I did have an opportunity to do a dummy shipment with Pilot just to see what type of numbers we were talking about. And I asked for 3 different quotes. So what I was theoretically shipping was a kitchen cupboard, 24 inches deep, 36 inches wide, and 82 inches tall. Now that's the crated size. And I used a weight of 186 pounds. I literally just made that up. So to ship from Indiana to Los Angeles, and I gave them a real address of a former customer, actually, the freight charges came out to be $241.56, plus a fuel surcharge, $113.53. Yeah, we're paying for that. And then the pickup and delivery with a lift gate was $82.35. Grand total, $437 and a few coins. So $437 to ship from Indiana to Los Angeles. That's not terrible at all. You certainly couldn't drive it there yourself for that amount of money. Now that was dropping the crate off at the mailbox driveway. So what if we want a little more service? The Inside First Door service. Well, they charged $50 for what they call 2-man delivery. So $487. But what if we want the premier service, that white glove service? Okay, stand back, hold on to your seats. That was an additional $54.90 for a grand total of $542. Whoa, $542 from Central Indiana to Los Angeles, California for $550. That doesn't seem to be all that terrible. Now, you do have to add in the crate, the pallet, and the foam that you use to pad this thing out. But, that's not all that much. Of course, you have time involved in building that crate and the foam. But, that's not outrageous. So just something to consider. There was a company in Seattle, Washington, a few years ago. They specialized in game tables. And for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the company. They are now out of business. But I talked extensively with the owners of the company. I met them at I think it was a Gen Con convention one year. And they literally deliver any place in the United States, continental United States, with their own vehicles and their own employees. So they will drive from Washington to Miami, Florida to deliver a game table. And what they did is they had a big Sprinter van, and they loaded the thing to the very top, with several orders. And they had like a 6-month window of when they would send a truck out. So if you ordered a game table today, you may not get it for 6 or 7, 8 months. And they had a backlog. They told me that that was the only way that they really could guarantee the service that they wanted and satisfy their customers in the way they wanted to. Not being a mathematician or an economist, that just sounds like a real hard way of doing business. And eventually they did go out of business. I don't know the exact reasons. I doubt if it was probably over their shipping strategy. But these are things that you've got to consider. And I think their big thing was that, yes, they did make this ready to assemble, but it was kind of intricate. And their people, if they did scratch something or damage something, they had the tools and materials with them that they could do a spot repair right on site. Because the very last thing you want to do is to build this wonderful piece of furniture, ship it across the country, and the thing is damaged. That is just an uber bummer, because now you got to figure out how you're going to fix that. Do you put it all on the customer and say, hey, you paid for it, it's yours now? Or are you going to try to find some remedy? You're going to have to find a craftsman in that area that could effect a proper repair. And if you're into that, that's something you might want to put on your shingle, that you do those type of repairs. I've done several of those for several furniture companies, and they generally are pretty lucrative. Not to be outdone, FedEx and UPS also has a white glove service. I punched some numbers into FedEx, and to ship a 6-drawer dresser from the Midwest to Los Angeles was about, I think, $1,100 for driveway delivery, and for inside delivery, it was like $1,290. So you are talking about a chunk of change here. And also consider that, FedEx and UPS, they're going to be a little bit more concentrated on speed than they are price. So that's going to be a premium service. Another company that you could contact is PackMail. I've mentioned them before for getting, packing supplies and, shipping or packing peanuts. They also ship furniture. I've gone in there to drop off packages, and there's a table, there's some chairs, there's a dresser sitting there in their lobby showroom, and I've inquired about it, and it's like, yeah, that's going to Montana, that piece is going to Louisiana, and they build crates, or they have someone that builds their own crates, and they ship them any place. Is it cheap? No, because again, you're taking a piece of furniture in and you're setting it there in their store. They're doing everything else, and you're going to, you're going to pay for that service. It might work for you, especially if you're kind of a volume customer. The more you ship, the lower that price comes down. Now, in my quest to not reinvent the wheel, I reached out to Nathan Hunter Designs in Bloomington, Indiana. Nathan does some absolutely amazing work, incredible design, and I asked how he ships. He said they used to use UPS freight. They would buy cardboard, they would buy foam. He would go up to the local big box store and just buy expanded polystyrene foam, EPS or styrofoam, I believe is the trade name, 2-inch. And that's what they would, surround their, artwork with, and then build a cardboard box. He would buy, large sheets of cardboard and build the box to surround the foam that's surrounding the product. And he said it just got to be such a hassle doing all that. They switched from foam to honeycomb, which is a a corrugated cardboard product, but it's kind of expensive and you have to buy a lot of it at a time and you have to store it. And he said, we just went to blanket wrapping. What? uship.com. I probably should have figured this out on my own, but not terribly smart. I have received canoes from carriers who are called hotshots. These are people with a truck or a van and often a trailer that travel the country, sometimes coast to coast, wandering aimlessly, picking up other people's products and delivering them. Some of them have a very fixed route, East Coast, Maine to Florida, Maine to Florida, Maine to Florida. But these hotshots make their living driving not semis and picking up loads as they go. What a fantastic service. And Nathan was telling me that, after using UShip for a while, he kind of got to know the carriers. And now typically he can just call up a carrier and say, I have, this item that needs to go to this place. And they can say, I can do it, or they can't. And he goes to the next one. And so he's kind of established his own base of people who provide the service that he needs. One of the great things about these hotshot carriers is that you don't need to build a crate. It's kind of like if you were moving this item yourself. If you were doing a local delivery, you would wrap it in a moving blanket and you would strap it to your pickup bed inside your van, inside your trailer, and take it and deliver it. That's exactly what they're doing. So you've immediately eliminated the cost of the materials of the crating or bundling, if you're using cardboard, and you have eliminated the time that it takes to do that, which if you've ever had to build a crate for something, it's not something you're going to do in a half hour. So what is UShip? UShip's a company based out of Austin, Texas, and technically it's an API, an application programming interface. They've built a website that allows computers to talk to each other. And the way this works is you build a credenza. It's these dimensions, it's this weight. It needs to go from your shop to a customer in Atlanta, Georgia. You post this on UShip and you start getting bids. This person will come in and say, I can pick that up on this date and it will cost you $700. And somebody else will see that and they might bid, higher. They can get it there faster, or they're simply, they charge more, or other times bids come in lower, and you just wait and see what happens, and you connect with a couple of them, and you talk to them, and you figure out, who you want to go with. Or you could make a post and say, I will pay $500 for someone to take, this credenza to Atlanta, Georgia. And somebody will volunteer for that. It's kind of, halfway between a bidding process, or you can go to a fixed, price process. And these people will ship, anything. Planes, trains, automobiles, heavy equipment. Have you ever seen the TV show Shipping Wars? That's exactly what I'm talking about. Now, you may not be shipping a 25-foot Tyrannosaurus Rex or the fuselage of a Huey helicopter, but this could be an absolutely great solution to your shipping problems. Now, my experience with UShip is with canoes. I've had customers in New York who need to get a boat to me to be restored, maybe recanvassed, and they contract with a UShip carrier. They bring me the boat, I do the boat, they contract with maybe the same carrier, sometimes different carrier, to pick up the canoe and ship it back to New York. It works pretty well. I've talked with these people, very interesting individuals who are doing this. The one guy told me that he puts like 250,000 miles on a truck. I think he said in about 18 months. He budgets a new truck every 2 years. So that's some real dedication right there. You really must like driving. And also doing my research, not to reinvent the wheel, I simply typed into Google, how to ship furniture. And one of the suggested lookups was how to ship furniture with Etsy. Now, many of you are selling on Etsy, and boom, right there. Etsy has a couple pages dedicated to shipping furniture, and they have partnered with UShip that you actually get a little bit of a discount if you are an Etsy seller and you book through the Etsy link into UShip. UShip also has partnership status with eBay and First Dibs and a whole bunch of other companies. They're not the only game in town. There's also Shipley that functions very, very much like UShip. Honestly, I think they have a better website. It's much easier to use and very, very streamlined. They've done a really good job. But it's the same type of thing. It's basically a trucker's load board where you post a load and truckers, carriers, shippers can bid on those loads or just accept or reject a fixed price load. So now what? Well, you're going to have to do some research. If you've been shipping furniture, but maybe not real satisfied with how you've been shipping furniture, might be time for investigating some other avenues. If you've been thinking about getting into the furniture business, like on Etsy, there's a guy in Southern Ohio that's building these giant king-size beds out of timbers. I mean, like 4x4s, 4x6s, solid wood. Well, you got to ship those, and you're going to have to figure out how. I've given you a number of ideas. You have a certain limit for the big three ground shippers. You have more options with freight companies, but maybe the UShip and Shipley would be a better, blanket wrap option for you. So how much should you charge the customer for all of this shipping? Should you build that price into the product price? Should you split it halfway with the customer? Well, that's getting into shipping strategy, and that sounds like another episode. So everything I've talked about here has links in the show notes, recommendations, missed jobs this week, kitchen cabinets, broken doors, broken slides, things like that. If that's something that you're into, something you're skilled at, there are people who need your services. I'd like to give a special thanks to listeners in London, England, and Louisville, Kentucky. I really appreciate it. As always, check out the show notes for affiliate links, and I'll remind you about coaching. If you're working on a problem in your business, you just need someone to talk to, someone to run an idea by, feel free to pick up the phone and give me a call. Until next week, happy woodworking.